$50 and the monkey can watch. Hello, my name is Will and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast reminding you it's not 1985 anymore, it's 1986! Now, if you grew up watching cop films in the 1980s, you'll know that law enforcement was the exclusive preserve of hard-drinking, psychologically damaged police detectives. Whether it was Sly Stallone in Cobra, Brian Bosworth in Stone Cold, or Big Dolph in Dark Angel, these films burnt an indelible image into the mind of viewers. Police precincts, we learnt, were populated by cops on the edge, mavericks who played by their own rules, and the only thing stopping them from cleaning up the streets were a bunch of prissy, pencil-pushing bureaucrats who wanted nothing more than our hero's gun and badge. Today, sadly, we live in an age of psychobabble and political correctness, and films where unhinged one-man armies could dispense summary justice are an anachronistic thing of the past. However, the film we're reviewing on this show is a triumphant throwback to that glorious age, a tongue-in-cheek celebration of everything that was right and everything that was ethically troubling of those classic films. That's why we're reviewing Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. To help me review the film, I'm joined by a man whose wife was killed by ninjas, or maybe she just ran off with a clown. It's the DTV Connoisseur himself, Matt Poirier. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Will. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be a fun one for sure.
Oh, excellent. I like the energy that you're already bringing. And I was glad to have you here because the film we're talking about is a love letter to the maverick cop genre. And I know that's a genre you are very fond of because you've produced your own tribute to those 80s and early 90s films in the form of a book. So tell me, what is it that you love about these films and why did you feel compelled to immortalize them in a novel?
Yeah, so Bainbridge, that's my short action novel. I can't call it a novella. I feel like action novella doesn't sound right? But it's a short action novel about a cop on the edge who is former special forces in Nam. He's getting after it in early 90s LA. So the book takes place in early 90s LA. I think there was a couple of reasons why I felt compelled. I think part of it was just, I love these movies. I think the other thing is that my most of my novels are literary fiction. And whereas my site, direct-to-video Connoisseur, is a lot of action movies. And I thought, what if I kind of married the two? And, I wanted to even see it was almost like a proof of concept to see if I could even write something like that. But as I was writing it, it was that kind of thing where there's like a lot of things to make fun of in those late 80s, early 90s actioners, and so many things to love about them as well. And I think, compared to Chuck Steele, my novel, the poking fun and the jokes and things like that are not quite as over the top. It'll be like a scene where maybe the main character, Bainbridge, will kill a biker, and he'll kind of just do the quick, 2 shots to the chest and 1 between the eyes, kill the biker. Then he goes back to the precinct and he's talking about things and he's like, okay, we're going to go out and, go follow this lead. And his partner's like, you can't go follow a lead. You just killed somebody. You need to wait till the investigation's over and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, no, what do we talk? It was almost like one of those no, we're not in the actual real life. We're in a 90s action movie. So we're going to go do this. Those kind of jokes. Like there's a reporter whose name is Daphne Meriden who, she's got this huge career. She went to graduate school. She's doing all this stuff, and she ends up being a damsel in distress at the end, and she's angry about it when the main character rescues her. She's like, what the hell is this? I've got this professional career, and the best thing I can do is be a damsel in distress. So kind of those kinds of things that you have in there. But still, the action quotient is there. And of course, spoiler alert, we do get an exploding helicopter in there. So it's a little bit of a tribute to Rambo, Rambo 3. So the helicopter is felled by an arrow, but not the same way as this exploding tipped arrow that you get in Rambo. But it is, I kind of make a little bit of a tribute to that in there.
Oh, Matt, I mean, you couldn't immortalize a finer moment, I think, from Rambo 3 in a book than celebrating the explosive tipped arrow. And I probably need to set up a blog now celebrating books with exploding helicopters.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because the way the exploding helicopter happens, the main character he learns sort of archery and knife techniques in the military from an Apache who he actually meets up with later on in the book. But he shoots the tail rotor of the helicopter, and the pilot is the baddie, right? And he's not really a good pilot, so he's not able to correct it, and the plane crashes into his mansion and blows up. And so, or not the plane, the helicopter. helicopter. So
well, there's cinematic precedent for that exploding helicopter that you've just described there. I don't know if you've ever seen the Michael Rooker film Skeleton Man. Very strange film, and one we should definitely review, Matt. That features that exact exploding helicopter.
See, I haven't seen that. No, so because the reason why I picked it was that style of, because I wanted a bow and arrow exploding helicopter in there, but I didn't want to go kind of like how Chuck Steele, like what we'll be talking about, goes way over the top of those kind of things. I didn't want to go so over the top, but I still wanted that tribute to it. And I think I'd read what happens if you take out the tail rotor of a helicopter? And what I had read about it was that an experienced pilot would be able to safely land a helicopter with a busted tail rotor, but maybe not. One who's new or a novice might not be able to correct it enough to get the plane, the helicopter safely on the ground. And I was like, oh, that's perfect, because this character he's like a rich, back when billionaires or rich or millionaires even were villains in movies. Right nowadays, people love billionaires for whatever reason, but they used to be villains. And that's that was kind of the idea.
Okay. Well, you've talked about your novel here, but I wanted to just get your thoughts on this genre of films that you were celebrating in your novel and that are being celebrated in this particular film. So what is it that you love about these films featuring ultra macho cops on the edge who they're going to shoot first and ask questions later?
So there's sort of like a two-pronged thing going on, because as a kid, of course, I just loved the idea of the one-man army that would just go in and just take everybody out. So there's that piece of it that I really loved. But then as I've grown up and I've kind of learned about things like sort of aggressive policing and, sort of the way that almost how sometimes these movies sort of groom us into thinking we need more aggressive policing laws and things like that. But even seeing metaphors to things that happen in real life, when we did The Last of the Finest, and they bulldozed the crack house, and that happened and really happened in L.A. Those kinds of things. There's almost kind of a more fun way of sort of picking fun at it, and almost seeing the over the topness. It was as a kid I didn't understand the over the topness. It was just here's this guy with 5 o'clock shadow, or maybe more 8 or 9 o'clock shadow, right? Who's just driving his car through a bunch of things and shooting up a bunch of places. And now it's there's more fun to it. I mean, seeing some other ones like Cracker Jack 2. It's when you see how stretched that genre is, it can be more fun there in that sense, I think.
Okay. Well, I can't finish this part of the podcast without asking you, who is your favorite Maverick cop?
So I think the number one all time has to be John McClane, I think, from Die Hard. I think that because Bruce Willis brings something to the obviously we could bring up Mel Gibson as well. I think of course he's a bit of a kind of a ridiculous figure now. It's you think of Mel Gibson, he probably would have been one of the lead baddies in John Wick, but now because of how bad his past is, he's in the TV series, direct to streaming TV series. But I almost feel like Willis brings something even more than what Mel Gibson brought to his character, to Riggs in Lethal Weapon. His character, the John McClane character in Die Hard, it was almost this sense of a mix of Danny Glover's "I'm too old for this," or I just wanted to just trying to get changed to go to a party kind of thing, and now I'm roped into this huge thing. So there's that vibe, plus the great one-liners, the great kills. It does get more over the top with, when you get to the sequels where he's using a police car to blow up a helicopter, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with that scene,
Yeah.
right? Yes, it gets a little crazy, but overall, I think he's probably my favorite. But kind of an honorable mention, one that I want to throw out there that for people who haven't seen this movie, you really have to see Thomas Howell's Mark Goddard in The Sweeper, PM Entertainment flick. I think Spiro Rosato's action directed it. He's one that I also love, which I would not have expected that I was going to come on your podcast today and talk about how great of a cop on the edge C. Thomas Howell was. And believe me, anybody when I was first told about The Sweeper, I was like, what, C. Thomas Howell? I think it was a Kenner from Movies in the Attic told me about this movie, and I was like, I don't, whatever. I'll watch it because you think, And then when I watched it, I was like, I can't believe I doubted him. This movie's amazing. And
it's a great flick, and it's got fantastic action in it.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be my honorable. He'd be my second, I think, is C. Thomas Howell's Mark Goddard.
Fair enough. Great choices. Great choices. So I think it's time to get stuck into Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires. So let's see if Trailer Man has got an opinion on the hero of this film.
Officer Chuck Steele is the best goddamn cop on the force.
Get out of my face.
Yeah! Do you have any idea how much damage you caused?
He's respectful to his superiors.
Face or balls. Yeah! Jesus!
He has a way with the public.
Hi, I'm Chuck Steele.
And he works alone.
I work alone.
But when an ancient curse descends on the city of angels, this maverick, renegade, loose cannon, lone wolf, cop on the edge, finds himself in a world of pain.
Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires is a claymation animated film that came out in 2018. It was written and directed by Mike Mort, who also voices the film's lead character. The movie is set in 1986 and it follows the story of Chuck Steele, a tough, no-nonsense cop who works in the Los Angeles Police Department. Known for his macho persona and unconventional methods, Steele is often at odds with his superior officers and colleagues. The plot kicks off with a series of bizarre and gruesome murders. The victims are all found with their blood drained, leading to speculations about the nature of the killer. Chuck soon discovers that the culprits are not ordinary criminals, but a horde of Trampires, a hybrid of tramps or homeless people and vampires who are terrorizing the city. Steele teams up with Dr. Abraham Van Rentel, an idiosyncratic vampire expert, to hunt down the Trampires and stop their dastardly scheme to take over LA. The film is a feature-length continuation of a character we first met in an animated short called Raging Balls of Steel Justice, which came out in 2013. Depending on your familiarity with British television, there are a couple of famous names involved in the voice work. So the comedians Jennifer Saunders and Paul Whitehouse provide some of the voices. The film has a 3.4 out of 5 user rating on Letterboxd and a 6.8 user rating on IMDb. So, with all of that out of the way, Matt, what did you make of Chuck Steele, Night of the Trampires?
I definitely enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I think, the jokes could kind of vary between like really like nailing it and getting it perfect to almost, I don't want to say hacky, but there's like there's a lot of like, men dressing up like women. It's, kind of that kind of that joke. And it's like in the 80s when it was John Ritter doing it, or late 70s, early 80s when it was John Ritter doing it. And, he'd come out onto the set dressed like a woman and, the studio audience would be howling, and then Janet would fix one of his fake breasts, and it would everybody would, like it really worked at that time. Right now, kind of in the 2010s, it's almost like, all right, you're gonna do that joke again. Oh, Chuck Steele's dressing up like a woman now. Oh, the chief. So you've got those things, but then you get all these other jokes that really nail it. Where it's like, I mean, there's a mention to Showdown in Little Tokyo, which I would not have expected. That there's a joke, kind of paying homage to that. I mean, you mentioned the kind of the Van Helsing kind of character is named Van Rental, which I love that idea that like that name is hilarious. So there's a lot of things that really work. I mean, I think overall it hits exactly the notes that I would want from one of these movies, where it hits like kind of the cop on the edge. It's. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you're telling, it's an hour and a half long roughly, and the volume of jokes that this movie is telling, there's going to be ones that land and ones that don't land. And I think to give it a hard time for the ones that don't land when there's so many that do, and the overall premise works, I think would be unfair. And plus the fact that it's animation, it's stop animation, it's just really fantastic. So yeah, this is a really fun time. I think for anybody who loves really this kind of 80s 90s action, I think you'd get a kick out of this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you love that era of action, then this is a definite must watch. And I think if you do watch it, I think you're going to really love it. I had an absolute blast with this film myself, and would completely echo your point. I think there's definitely some jokes in here that don't land. There are some sort of very crude sexual ones where Abraham Van Rentel sort of ends up face down on a female character who's in hospital, and it's just, I don't know, it just was a little bit too crude for my I mean, I can enjoy unsophisticated humor, but there are a few gags in this film. There's another sexual related gag with a pig later on in the film, which again I just felt a little bit too much for me. But as you were saying, for the volume of gags that do land, I am in no way going to hold the ones that that I didn't prefer so much. I'm not going to hold those against it. And you made a great point that I definitely wanted to get into, which was about the concept of this film, because I thought it was genuinely inspired. So this idea that you've got vampires they've been persecuted for hundreds of years and they've ended up hitting the bottle after they found themselves, relentlessly hunted down, and they've now sort of mutated to the point where they can only get their nourishment from sucking the blood from someone who's drunk. I mean, I loved that idea. It felt very 80s, like something that might have turned up in the plot of a Fred Olen Ray film. I mean, yeah, what did you make of the concept?
No, I totally agree, and I think the idea that a movie like this, right, that like, okay, it's innovative enough on its own from an animation standpoint. The fact that they're doing this animated send up to 80s action, like that on its own would have been enough. But the fact that they do something new and unique with the vampire idea, I thought was really, really funny. And I agree with you there. Like you said, yeah, you could see Fred Olen Ray doing something like this. You could see Ross Hagen being like kind of the head, or Sybil Danning playing the part that Jennifer Saunders was voicing. Right? Like you could see that in a Fred. So I didn't even think of that part of it. I was just thinking there was something. But you're right. Like if Fred Olen Ray listens to this, yeah, he's probably already starting to pen the script right now.
And I mean, that also gets us into another interesting aspect of this film, which is that actually it's, on the surface, it's a maverick cop film, but it actually blends quite a few genres here. So it's obviously action, we've got a lot of action here, there's comedy, but it also definitely, with the vampires and certainly with some of the kind of the monsters and the violence that we get in here, definitely would work inside the horror genre. So I wanted to get your take on how this film sort of balances all of those genres.
No, for sure. Because one of the things I hadn't heard of this until you mentioned doing this movie for this episode. So I hadn't heard of this movie before, and I wanted to see what other kind of reviewers in our ecosystem thought about it. And actually, none of the big names in sort of the action, low budget action sphere have covered this. So Bulletproof, Comeuppance, Video Vacuum, none of them have looked at this one, but the horror ones have. There were more some horror ones that have looked at it, and I think you're right, because again, vampires are one of those ones that kind of, I don't say that they're tired, but it's like it's hard to kind of keep coming up with new things to do with vampires. But this one does it, and I mean, yes, the horror stuff it's interesting. With it being animation, it's almost like they could do more with the horror stuff than what you would get in a like an actual horror movie. Like, when you get the vampire monster at the end, where she's like kind of opening up her stomach and like, like, I think if that was being done with either practical effects or CGI effects in a live action horror movie, it would be too much. You'd just be like, okay, this is, I need to take a break here. I'm gonna maybe keep myself from getting sick. Whereas in an animation thing, you can really go all out with it. And so in that sense, it was actually kind of cool that, like, the way he married the horror elements in with the action elements, he really played with the space of animation in a way that allowed him to do some things that I don't know you could do in a regular horror movie.
Well, the one live action comparison that really came to my mind when I was watching this film was From Dusk Till Dawn. And especially the way, I think if you look at the last act of that film and the last act of this film, the way they absolutely go completely over the top with the vampires and the monsters, it really felt like, I was making that sort of link in my mind between those two films. And obviously that's a live action film which absolutely goes to town with practical effects that, I don't think you feel cheated by From Dusk Till Dawn in terms of the creativity and the level of action and gore that you get there.
Yeah, and again, another area where this movie makes the right decision, right, is that, From Dusk Till Dawn takes place in this out-of-the-way, like, bar in kind of dusty, remote
Middle
Mexico.
of nowhere, yeah.
Right. And so it's exactly like what you would expect something like that to happen in. In Chuck Steele, they go to the circus and they do the scene in the circus, right? So you've got clowns, and I was so in that sense it was like perfect, again one of those decisions the movie made that worked really well, and so I really love that. So you're right, that's a good point. I think From Dusk Till Dawn is a good comp with that. And another movie that I was thinking of was another horror comedy, was Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh, where there's sort of like that main baddie female Sturba who but I don't know if she did anything like opening her stomach and that kind of thing. But overall, I thought it was really, really well done to take From Dusk Till Dawn and put From Dusk Till Dawn at the circus. I thought was a great idea.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the horror-related aspects of this film, but we really shouldn't overlook the cop film cliches, the cop film tropes that we get in this film. So, yeah, how well did you think Chuck Steele embodies the 80s cop film?
So I mean, I think they do a really great job, especially at the beginning. I mean that opening sequence where his wife is killed by evil ninjas. It's almost like they're just hitting every single one of them, right? And they're doing them all at like a level 10 or 11, in each case. And then like when he gets his partner, he gets his new partner, and it's like that was really great too, where it's like he's doing this whole sequence. It's like straight out of PM Entertainment, right? Like you could see in a PM Entertainment flick, you could see Gary Daniels not like talking to his partner, right, and being like, I don't need a new partner, but you could see him saying like, how am I going to stop these bad guys from getting away? Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to climb out of my car, climb into a rig, right, that's driving an oil tanker. Because, I mean, technically, right, Rage has him driving the oil tanker, right? He just steals somebody's oil tanker and just drives off on that, right? So it's not like we haven't seen somebody steal an oil tanker before. But you could see, like Spiro Rosados, that would be like something that he would just be like, like up all night. I'll say coffee. I'm not going to use anything illicit that he would be fueling his ideas with. But you could see him with a pencil and like a dirty notebook just being like, oh, yes, this is great. I could see Spiro Rosados watching this movie and being like, why didn't I think of that? Like that's just such a great idea. So it's like a perfect kind of thing. Now, I think as the movie goes on, it falls more into some kind of more hacky things. And it's almost like they're more concerned with making Chuck Steele into a goofball than sort of a parody of a cop on the edge kind of thing, where it's like, okay, let's have him dress up like he's good. There's a lady of the night and they take her clothes so he can like go undercover or something like that. Okay, he's going to dress up like the lady of the night, and there's a reveal about what happens to his wife, what actually happens to his wife, and all those kind of things. It's almost like they feel like they really have to bring him down a peg. And for that part of it, I feel like they kind of overdo that part of it, because I almost feel like with the cop on the edge thing, that when you're parodying the cop on the edge thing, like Chuck Steele already looks like a goofball when he's like driving the oil tanker to like put it in the path of the escaping criminals. That's already goofy enough that we don't need to have all these other things to like bring him down a peg. He's already, in the construct of the movie, he's brought down a peg. So I think that part of it, I think, didn't necessarily need to. It was a little bit more heavy-handed as the movie went on.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed seeing all of these tropes play out in these films. I mean, we have some of the all-time favorites here. So we have Chuck Steele has the classic yelling boss who sits behind a desk and who is aghast at the wrecking ball approach that Chuck Steele takes to his career and takes to performing his duties and his jobs. And I really enjoyed the running jokes about the fact that none of Chuck Steele just can't keep one of his police partners alive, and the increasingly surreal partners that he gets to team up with this particular film. I really enjoyed seeing those particular tropes lampooned here in Chuck Steele.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I kind of liked was the more overt thing where, so he's like essentially negotiating with the boss, with his chief. And the chief's like, you got to get a new partner. You got to do this or do that. And he's like, okay. He's like, what is he? They face or balls, right? Meaning he's going to punch him in one or the other. And it's like this more overt version of, the detective guy makes his chief's life hell, right? That's the whole point of I think what was it? I think some of them you see like the chief actually drinking like Pepto-Bismol or something like that, because it's like some of those the real movie, because it's just like
Give me an ulcer.
Right, exactly. And I kind of got a kick out of the fact that he was like, that instead of it just being like kind of a gradual, like right, he needs to drink the Alka-Seltzer or the Pepto-Bismol or whatever. It's just like, I'm just going to punch him in the face or punch him in the balls, So I definitely got a kick out of that. But again, it's where you kind of get that, you have the cop on the edge thing. Or sorry, the chief for the cop on the edge, but then they do this whole thing of that character starting to like dress like a woman, right? That he's like kind of into cross dressing, and it's almost like he's doing it because he's being manipulated by the police police psychiatrist. But it's almost like, again, like they had it nailed with that character, right? Like. And so going the whole cross-dressing thing, it was like, how much do I, and there were a couple of jokes that played out with it that were kind of funny, but it was like, overall, it was like, how much did I need that when I already had the trope that was being nailed so well? Did I need him dressing up like a woman as well?
And I wanted to also talk about the soundtrack of this film because it's very authentic. Well, it is authentic because there's a great selection of hair metal songs here from the 80s, and I was a metaler in my youth. And some of the names here were familiar to me. So like we've got songs by Vixen, Icon, and Saxon on the soundtrack here. But there were some bands here that I'd never heard of, like Loudness, XYZ. But yeah, I loved the soundtrack of this film. Did you enjoy it as much as I did?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just going back to 10-year-old Matt, I think one of my earliest crushes was on Vixen, the ladies of Vixen, in particular the lead singer. So they're great to have them be included in this. And I was like, oh wow, that's a Vixen song. That is so fantastic. So yeah, I remember. In terms of like the hair metal scene, right? Vixen was kind of like when you get to that point where it's like, okay, you've had Def Leppard, that wasn't really or quite right, but then you had Poison. But they were like kind of the third tier where it was like grunge is coming soon, right? Like grunge is but as a 10-year-old, I didn't know that. I was like, oh, these girls are great. I love them, stuff like that. I mean, I imagine if I was like at the record store buying a Vixen tape, that like some 16-year-old with a mullet was seeing that, like going to spend his dishwashing money on that and being like, oh God, now 10-year-olds like this? Get out, what can I like that's the exact opposite of this? Oh, this Nirvana thing, I'll get that. Yeah. So.
Grunge was the meteorite that killed off hair metal, I think. But
exactly.
Right, well, I think it's time to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the exploding helicopter action.
The best damn bounty hunter in the business.
I didn't do nothing. I'm clean. I ain't no cop.
When they jump, he flips out. He's a professional.
We got some psycho running loose in the streets, and I'm the only son of a bitch who can bring him in for you.
Who's making out like a bandit.
I thought you were going to protect me.
Well, hell, I am protected.
But no, he's not out for the money.
What's your game, Kenna? Who you are?
I want out.
He's still the only one who knows what this guy looks like.
He's in for his life.
Damn you, Wilson!
Wings Hauser. Reason to Die. Rated R. On video cassette from Bitmark Entertainment.
We're back, and now we're talking about the exploding helicopter action. This occurs early in the film when our hero, Chuck Steele, dreams about a confrontation atop a skyscraper with his arch nemesis, Akumi. Our copiously coiffured cop is sat on a motorcycle inside a helicopter, hovering above the building's roof. Steele revs his motorbike's engine and launches the vehicle out of the chopper onto the roof, just as one of Akumi's army of ninjas fires a rocket launcher at the chopper, blowing it up. Matt, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
Well, so I think the first thing that I always love an action movie that gets the exploding helicopter out of the way early. It's almost like one of those things where it's like check the box, It's like almost like a bingo card or something like that. And so that's something I always appreciate there. And so that was one thing that I really liked about it. I like the over-the-top nature of it. I like the fact that it included motorcycles. All of those elements there. I think, for a movie like this, it's doing a send-up to the action genre. They did a really good job with getting that trope out of the way.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I really love the exploding helicopter because it's part of an absolutely fantastic sequence. So this dream sequence that Chuck Steele is having at the beginning of this film, I mean, it is just a wonderful, over-the-top action sequence here on top of a skyscraper, an army of ninjas because, it's the 80s, why not? We've got Chuck Steele on his motorcycle that's firing rockets out of the rear, just like Chuck Norris's in Delta Force. So, yeah, as part of an entire action sequence, I loved it. I thought it was thoroughly entertaining. But you felt like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. They understand these 80s films. And yeah, it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And you're going to be in safe hands with it.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, right, is this is the second time I've been on the show to talk about an exploding helicopter in a dream sequence, right? Because Dancing It's On also had a dream sequence helicopter explosion.
Yes, well, I wanted to mention that very fact because, you have watched the only other one that I am currently aware of. So it is intriguing to see these helicopters can take place, within the dreams of characters in films. I mean, normally they just take place within my personal dreams, but great to see them also inhabiting the dream space of film characters. I haven't brought in terms of where this stands in terms of originality, I haven't brought an entirely comprehensive list with me because it would just be too long. But there is a very well-trodden long lineage of animated films that feature exploding helicopters, from the Lego Movie through to very young child-focused animations like Storks even has an exploding helicopter in. Things like Monsters vs. Aliens, and then obviously there's a very long, the Japanese anime is really the pioneer in including exploding helicopters in animation with things like Akira, and the Japanese animated Lupin series is absolutely filled to the brim with exploding helicopters. So it's good to see animated films featuring so many helicopter explosions.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because it makes sense, I guess, right? Because if you can do it in a real action movie, right? Why not do it in an animated action movie? Because all you're doing is drawing it, right? You don't even have to, or in this case, you're modeling it. It's amazing, kind of as just sort of looking at sort of the scope of the exploding helicopter in film, right? Where I think from your end of it, right, when you embarked on this, like probably just couldn't imagine, right, just how it's like one of those things, like you're watching this movie and you're like, it seems like helicopters blow up in movies a lot, and then when you realize just how often they do, I guess that even animated movies are no stranger to it.
Yeah, as I've made this point many times over the years. I mean, I've been doing this. I've been cataloguing exploding helicopters in films for 15 years, and I really thought that when I started doing this, I thought after about 3 or 4 years, I'd kind of be largely on top of it. And ever since I started looking under this particular rock, there's just more and more stuff to find. So it's if I'm going to make an analogy to a rock, I'd probably make an allusion to mythology. And say it's a Sisyphean task, Matt.
Right, exactly. I just saw John Wick 4 recently, so it's like, yes, you're kind of making your way up those steps, and sort of like each movie, right, is a baddie, a stuntman who's getting thrown down the right, getting shot and thrown out the right, and you get to the very top, and then there's Marco Zaror just like saying like, nope, throwing you back down and giving you a whole bunch of more exploding helicopter movies you weren't expecting.
Yep, I can feel Keanu Reeves' pain. So, yes. Okay, well, I think that just about wraps things up for this show. Matt, thank you for joining me once again. Before you go, I've really only got one thing to ask you. Face or balls?
Yeah. God, I'm gonna have to go face, because that pain, So I guess you if you played football or tennis, you probably would know it as well. But baseball, I one time was trying to lean into. We were playing softball, actually. I was trying to lean into a pitch, and I definitely took it square there, and that pain is just so intense that I think I could handle it in my face a little bit better. I've been, I'm used to bumping my head on things, or whatever, that. I understand that pain much better.
Okay. Well, before you do go, do you want to take a moment to tell people about where they can find your work online?
Yes, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where everything is. It's my posts or my reviews, which we're still going strong. We started in 2007. We're still posting, trying to get one review a week. But also links to the podcast, which is on all major podcatchers. Will from here, he's been on numerous times. But actually, when this episode drops, probably the most recent one will have been our conversation on the 2 Roadhouse movies, which was a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. And then of course my novels, Bainbridge, of course, my action novella we were talking about here earlier in the podcast, and then my most recent novel, Don's House in the Mountains. All of those can be found on the website as well. So dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. Sorry, I was getting a little confused there.
As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website at explodinghelicopter.com for more reviews of films where helicopters explode. We're entirely reliant on word of mouth to spread awareness of what we're doing, so if you could see it in your heart to rate, review, or retweet what we do, I'd be really very grateful. We'll be back soon. But until then, what should people do, Matt?
Keep watching the sky for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Do you have any words of wisdom for a rookie like me, sir?
Sure. Work hard, eat your greens, and never stick your dick in a mangle.
Wait, what?